Hi, I'm Craig Johnson, and I'm just sitting here in a Morris chair thinking about the 19th century. And that includes thinking about big things like the Industrial Revolution, the rise of factories, the prevalence of manufactured goods all of a sudden, increased urbanization. And then there was also the development of scientific theory, that everything could be explored through rational thought, through experimentation, observation, and the like. Well, not surprisingly, there were some counterweight artistic circles that arose, raising questions like, are we losing anything? What about handcrafted, artisan-made, unique works that might explore the imagination, creativity of an earlier time, where questions aren't answered through science or through realism, but evoke a sense of wonder, mystery, and miracle. So in literature, there were a lot of people running around and collecting folklore and fairy tales from the earlier oral traditions so they wouldn't get lost. And there were newly written fairy tales as well that were coming along. So this included a lot of familiar names like the Brothers Grimm. In Germany, Hans Christian Andersen. In Denmark and in England, lots of different people, from Oscar Wilde to Christina Rossetti with her dazzling fairy tale poem, The Goblin Market. Christina's brother, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, was also a poet and one of the leading painters of the Pre-Raphaelite movement, very much associated with this. And they really luxuriated in this exploration of very sensuous medievalism. Just like the painter Evelyn de Morgan, another Pre-Raphaelite painter, and her husband, William de Morgan, who created a lot of beautiful ceramic tiles, much more in the arts and crafts kind of movement, that really centered around the celebrated designer William Morris, who, among many other things, designed the extremely comfortable Morris chair that I'm sitting in right now. So what kind of chair is a Morris chair? You'd be surprised. But I don't want to talk about them. On the edge of this really brilliant circle of people was William de Morgan's sister, Mary. Mary was a redundant woman. You see, in 1851, there was a British study following the census. Mary was born in 1850, noting that there were now several 100,000 more women than men in British society. So there were women who weren't getting married, who didn't have children, who would need to be able to find some sort of work. What to do with these surplus women? Clearly, they could not be understood outside men. Well, this is what Mary de Morgan did with her redundant life. She learned to type. She held down a variety of day jobs in the clerical and educational fields. She was involved in a lot of issues of the day. She was a suffragist. She wrote many articles on trade unions, education, Jewish immigration, social reform, poverty. She wrote short stories. She published a novel. And she had 3 volumes of fairy tales that, in their fanciful, once upon a time, far-off kingdoms, weave together themes about knowledge, wealth, gender, creativity, and self-determination, while at the same time subtly commenting on the issues of her own day. The things that I've just been blathering about. Here is Mary de Morgan's 1880 fairy tale, The Wise Princess. Once upon a time lived a king whose wife was dead, and who had one little daughter, who was named Fernanda. She was very good and pretty, but she vexed all her ladies by asking them questions about everything. Your Highness should not wish to know too much. I want to know everything. As she grew up, she had teachers and learnt every language and every science, but still said, "It is not enough. I want to know more." Now in a deep cave underground there lived an old wizard whose long white beard flowed to his feet, and he was so wise there seemed to be nothing left for him to learn. So one night, after everyone was asleep, Princess Fernanda slipped softly out of the palace and stole away to the wizard's cave. He was reading an immense book by a dim green light as the princess entered.
"Who are you, and what do you want with me?"
"I am the Princess Fernanda,
and I wish to be your pupil. Teach me all you know."
"Why do you wish for that? You will not be better or happier for it."
"I am not happy now," sighed the princess wearily. "Teach me. You shall find me an apt pupil, and I will pay you with gold."
"Oh, I will not have your gold, but come to me every night at this hour, and in 3 years you shall know all that I do."
So every night the princess went down to the wizard's cave while all the court were sleeping. And the people wondered at her more and more. Oh, how much she knows, how wise she is. When the 3 years had gone by, the wizard said to her,
"Go, I can teach you no more. You are as wise as I."
The princess thanked him and went back to the palace. She was very wise. She knew the languages of all animals. The fishes came from the deep at her call, and the birds from the trees. She could tell when the winds would rise and when the sea would be still. She could have turned her enemies into stone or given untold wealth to her friends. But for all that, when she smiled, her lips were very sad, and her eyes were always full of care. Her father thought she was sick and would have sent for the physicians, but she stopped him. "Why should doctors help me, father, seeing that I know more than they?" One night, a year later, she returned to the wizard's cave and fell on her knees beside him. "You have taught me much, yet I am ignorant of one thing. Teach me that also, how to be happy."
"Nay, I cannot teach you that, for I do not know myself. Go and ask it of them who are happy. They are wiser than I."
The princess left the cave and wandered down to the seashore. All that night she spent sitting on a rock that jutted out into the sea, watching the wild sky and the moon coming and going behind the clouds. The sea dashed up around her, and the wind blew, but she did not fear them. And when the sun rose, the waters were still, and the wind fell. A skylark rose from the fields, singing as though its heart would burst with pure joy. The princess called in the bird's own tongue, "Why do you sing?" "Because I am happy." "And why are you happy?" "The sky is so blue, and the fields are so green." "Is that not enough to be happy?" "Teach me how, that I may be happy too." "I cannot. I do not know how to teach." And the skylark rose singing into the blue overhead. And the Princess Fernanda sighed and turned back towards the palace. There she met her little dog, who barked and jumped for joy on seeing her. "Oh, little dog, you are so glad to see me. Why are you so happy?" "Why?" answered the dog. "I have plenty to eat and a soft cushion to rest upon, and you pet and caress me. Is not that enough to make me happy?" "It is not enough for me." But the little dog only wagged its tail and licked her hand. Inside her room was the princess's favorite little maid, Doris, folding up her dresses. "Doris, you look very merry. Why are you so happy?" "Please, your royal highness, I am going to the fair, and Luke is to meet me there. Only I wish I had a pretty new hat to wear with my new dress." "Then you are not perfectly happy either." In the evening at sunset, the princess went out into the village and saw a woman nursing a fat, rosy baby and hushing it to sleep. "You have a fine little child there. Surely you must be very happy." "Oh, yes, I am. Only just now my goodman is out fishing, and as he's rather late, it makes me anxious." Is no one ever truly happy, thought the princess, and wandered on till she came to a church. All was still and empty within, but before the altar, on a splendid funeral platform, lay the body of a young soldier who had just died in the war. He was dressed in his uniform, and his chest was covered with medals, and his sword lay beside him. He was shot through the heart, but his face was peaceful, and his lips were smiling. The princess looked at the quiet face. Then she kissed the cold forehead. If he could speak, he surely could teach me. No living mouth could ever smile like that. Then she looked up and saw a white angel standing by, and she knew it was Death. You have taught him. Will you not teach me to smile like that? Nay, he learned that while he was doing his duty, and so saying, the angel vanished. Pondering this, the wise princess went back to the seashore. There was a high sea and a great wind, and a little boy was playing on a row of rocks. Suddenly, he slipped into the water and was struggling among the waves. He would soon be drowned. The princess plunged into the water and swam to the child. Taking him in her arms, she swam back, placing him safely on the rocks. But the waves were so strong that she could scarcely keep above them. As she struggled, she saw the angel of death coming over the water towards her, and she turned to meet him gladly. Now, the angel said, clasping her in its arms, I will teach you all you want to know. And the angel drew her under the water, and she died. The next morning, they found her lying on the shore, with her skin white and her lips cold. But her face was calm, and she smiled as she had never smiled before. They carried her home, and she was laid out in great state, covered with gold and silver. She was so wise, sobbed Doris, her maid. She knew everything. Not everything, said the skylark from the window, for she asked me, ignorant though I am, to teach her how to be happy. That was the one thing I could not teach her, said the old wizard. Yet I think now she must be wiser than I. Look how she smiles.